Might I accompany you to the capital?
Welcome, everybody, to MogTalk 153. Sorry, I was muted. I was muted at the very beginning. I didn't realize it. It is Saturday, December 8th. And if you guys haven't watched MogTalk before, this is a show based around the Final Fantasy XIV community where we discuss everything from Savage Raiding to Chocobo Racing. And today is going to be about story, lore, and lots of other wonderful things with my pal here, Mr. Ethys, who seems to be my only resource for this kind of stuff. I don't know if I just don't have anyone else, or it is what it is. But no, dude's here. Mr. Ethys is here.
I'm here. Hello, everyone. Hi.
Yeah. Ethys, tell everybody who you are real quick.
I'm Ethys.
Okay. I'm just gonna sit here and wait, dude.
I make lore videos on YouTube sometimes, and I stream every day on Twitch. But yeah, I focus a lot on lore and story stuff. That's my jam. That's my thing.
Jam, you've been doing it for a while, dude.
I've been doing it for 3 years.
3 years, yeah.
Yeah, long enough. Nearly 4 years.
Okay. We are not going to be talking about Avengers Endgame. No, I don't believe so. Unless it somehow finds it into the relation of the Final Fantasy XIV story, but it could. There are some parallels, but
Knowing Koji, yeah, it probably could.
Yeah, of course. All right, guys. So today we're gonna do lore, story, all that good stuff. It's only the two of us. I know the last couple episodes we had like 5-6 people on, but we decided to trim it down to just the two and have an intimate session here with my friend over in Australia. Oh yeah. Look at that smile. You know he's Australian just by the way his face looks right now.
I like it intimate. Intimate's good.
Okay. So we'll see what we can cover here. It's going to be a shorter show probably. I don't think it's going to extend too long. I am running in that 2-hour timeline window. I'm going to try to cut it a little bit short so I'm not late to work this time, but we'll see what happens. So at this, I see you got it ready. This is my first question for you because, of course, this is the most recent thing that you've been working on and going through. How's that lore book, dude?
It is so good.
Is it?
Do you not have a copy?
I do. It's wrapped still. It's in the plastic still.
Okay. All right. Okay. So it's been 2 years since they released the last one, right? Well, exactly 2 years. It was at the last FanFest, and I was a little bit concerned because the first volume, right? It covers lore from like right back through 1.0, right back from the beginning of 2010, up through to 3.4, right? And I was, when they announced they were going to do another one, I was like, how the hell are they going to find that much lore to put into another book? Like, is it going to be a really short book? Is there going to be a lot of overlap? I was a little bit kind of apprehensive, but it's great. It's the same length. It's, just as much like new information. Apparently it's a lot of stuff that Koji wanted to put in the first book, but like just didn't meet the final cut because of length issues. But subsequently, a lot of the stuff that's in here is stuff that's like a little bit more esoteric than it is in the first one. Like there's a whole section on architecture of different cultures. There's a whole section on like the various different faiths of the different cultures and city states. There's a full 2 pages on the Lambs of Dalamud, on all the saints of the 12, on like the history of flight in Eorzea. Yeah, it's crazy. Like there's a lot of on like the development of like language and philology going back to the Allagans. So there's a lot more sort of like detailed, kind of deeper stuff in it, which is, I'm so happy with it. Oh, another thing they did. So I'm trying not to take credit for this, but a couple of people have told me like, "Oh, isn't that interesting, Ethys?" When I started doing YouTube content, I started doing videos on the like arms and armor of Eorzea, all the different like weapons and armor sets and stuff like that, and the lore behind them, as well as dungeon lore tours. And now both of those are in the lore book. There's a like a detailed sort of full page explanation on every single dungeon in the game. And you know, the significance of that place, the significance of, you know, the bosses and particular enemies in there, the history of them. Yeah, every single dungeon. And then there's a huge section on all the different weapons, and not just like the relic sets, but all like the more sort of mundane like weapon and armor types in the game. And it's fantastic. So it's really good.
Do you think Koji and his team watch your videos?
I don't think they watch them like religiously, but I know for a fact that they've seen some of them.
Okay. So they have an understanding of some of the content you've made, and so there is a high possibility they looked at that and said, "Hey."
Yeah, well, it's not just my content. Like, that's one of the awesome things about the 14 team is that they're so like plugged into the type of content that's being made by the community, right? So it's stuff that I'm doing. It's I mean, more importantly, it's stuff that Moose is doing, like on the forums and for Gamerscape. But yeah, they're definitely cognizant of that, and they're cognizant of like the people that are interested in lore. They're cognizant of the type of stuff that we want to know, the type of stuff that we're interested in, and they've really sort of delivered on that. So
okay,
I'm so happy with it.
I do have a question as well. In your opinion, looking through lore and looking through everything that they put in that book, do you feel like they wrote this stuff to put it in the book, or this is stuff they've just had in their head, part of the world, and then they're like, okay, we're going to put it in the book? Or
no, this is mostly like stuff that they've had copywritten already for just for resources for like the developers. And when you're designing dungeons, it's the thing that Koji and Oda do that is sort of like I guess different to what most developers I think do, is they write the lore like right at the beginning, at the sort of design stage of all these new pieces of content, rather than the developers. Like the way it happens, I think, for most dev teams is that developers will make a dungeon, or they'll make a level, or they'll design a piece of content, and then they'll hand it over to the narrative writers and they'll say, hey, make this fit. Where does this fit? Where does this go? Whereas Koji and Oda are like right at square one, communicating with the designers and saying, all right, this is what this place is about. These are the kind of design elements it's going to have. This is what the architecture is going to be like. This is like the history of the place. So it's stuff that they've already got like notes on, and they've just sort of like collated it and I guess like organized it, made it in such a form that it's sort of a bit more coherent. But yeah, and I don't think very much of this stuff is stuff that was like specifically written for a lore book. Certainly for the first one, almost none of it was like specifically written for a lore book. This one, there's probably a little bit more, but it is seriously just stuff. And a lot of it is stuff that they've had like lying around in files of, you know, notes of various things since like 1.0. Like Koji was talking about in the lore panel, that there's a couple of stuff in here, a couple of things in here, like the notes on the saints of the 12. So you know, when you do like a guild leave, right? You get like little leaf plates, these little things.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So they've been in the game since 1.0. And we get like the picture for all of them, but we never got the story for any of them. And it's something that they were planning on expanding on like through 1.0, but they just never got the opportunity to. So all these notes they've got on all these different saints and explaining all these different images and the sort of tales behind them is stuff that they've just had like sitting around since like 2009. And I've just never had an opportunity to give it to people. Yeah,
So this is kind of just their way of getting this information that's just sitting around and pushing
yeah,
it out and making sure people kind of have an idea what's going on.
yeah, totally. Well, there's a lot of things that, again, going back to 1.0 and going back to like the beginning of A Realm Reborn, where there'll be these unanswered questions that people will constantly ask Koji, and he's not allowed to tell us. He'll be like, "Oh, maybe in a future patch," because he knows the answer. Like, there's an answer, but he's not sort of authorized to talk about it until they either put it in game or they kind of do something like this. So there's a lot of that kind of stuff in here.
Okay. There was one thing that they were talking about. I guess this could be another outlet that giving, like, maybe one day giving Koji like a library in the game where he just kind of puts stuff everywhere and no.
Well, he gave us one, didn't he? And it was, not what we were hoping. I remember when Heaven's Ward was announced, and they gave us a shot of the Great Gubor Library from the outside, and they didn't say what it was, but it looked exactly like sort of old artistic renditions of the Great Library of Alexandria.
Mm-hmm.
And I got so excited because he'd been talking in interviews like up to that point about how they were going to put a library in the game and how it was going to be full of books and you could go there and you could read the book. And it turned out to just be a dungeon, and we were disappointed and really butthurt.
Right.
Nothing's really kind of come of it since then. What I really want, you played like Elder Scrolls games, like Skyrim, Oblivion. Yeah, how you just go around the world and you just like collect books.
Right.
And you can read them and put them on a shelf in your house.
I mean, they kind of have little tidbits of that, don't they? In some of the dungeons, it's not like expansive,
but it'll be at most like 2 or 3 sentences. It won't be, like 2,000, 3,000, 5,000 words like a lot of the books in Elder Scrolls are. And you can't collect them and put them on a shelf in your FC house or whatever, which is what I would like.
I'm sure that's giving them an idea for sure, because already you're collecting so many other things. Why not collect books while you're out there too?
Thing, right? Orchestrion rolls, triple triad cards, minions, and you've got places to put all those. Why not just like throw some books into the mix with that?
Yeah, because I know the stuff that was in Skyrim for sure was all like just saying, hey, this is just a platform for the writers to have fun. All right, just go out there, write a little book, throw in whatever you want to, and then you have the boring stuff, the recipe books, the stale versions of history books, the exciting, like, just written stories. They were just actually books. They're nothing to do with anything else. It's just someone writing a book in the game.
Yeah, and some of them will extrapolate on like history within the context of the game. Some of them will just be like narratives and anecdotes and stuff like that. Like you say, some of them will be like recipe books. Some of them will be like books on like geography and architecture. And writers are cheap. That's the thing. When it comes to like designing content for a game, just about the cheapest thing is having a writer just write stuff that doesn't need to go anywhere other than just be put in a book.
Right. I mean, I guess you could say that about writers who are not deeply involved with the story, right? People who are like really invested, like Koji, super invested, and he knows all the details about everything else, trying to get someone in his place to kind of learn everything and then not just make up shit. I don't know. Maybe it's not valued as much as I think it is, but I feel like at the moment he is so like, I don't know how to explain it, but he's just so much like into the story and lore and the building of the world and everything that there's not really a replacement for him. But if you bring in someone who's just going to write a book about two Lalafels having a romantic adventure together, that's not going to be very difficult, right?
No, it's not going to be very difficult. And obviously you'd get Koji and Oda to like, edit them and vet them and stuff like that.
Right.
And the thing is, like, there are people that are as invested. So, for instance, the first law book, when it came out, it had a bunch of errors in it and, grammatical errors and spelling mistakes and, like, missing bits and places where it says, Garlemald instead of Gridania. And there were quite a few of those sort of things. And Anonymous, who's the sort of law king of the official forums and of Gamerscape, he went through and sort of identified all these errors and like submitted reports and stuff for them. So for the second one, Koji actually paid Anonymous to help him edit it and go through the manuscripts and identify those errors before they published. And that's just sort of one example of, you know, someone who's a good writer and is as invested in the lore and could easily kind of, you know, contribute stuff.
But they only need him for that one thing right now.
They only used him for that one thing right now.
True.
Okay. I hope it leads to other things. Like, that would be fantastic if Moose became a contributor.
Right. I mean, it's always possible. I mean, they do reach out. I don't know how many examples there are of that, but I know a lot of people who are playing the game that are now on community team and doing other things for them and stuff. So I don't see any reason why not.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So past the lore book, I kind of want to start getting into, there's two main topics I kind of want to hit. One is the main direction of the story, how the story is being implemented through the game and how it's being received. And then I want to actually go into the story and start talking about some of the aspects of things that, and just to let you know, everybody that's watching the show, I'm doing this from a very casual, I know kind of some things going on in the game, but I don't research and study any of it. I pay attention when it catches my interest, right?
Kind of. Frosty, you're king casual when it comes to story stuff, right?
I'm king casual for a lot of things, just to be honest with you. But yeah, this is definitely one of them, is that I'm interested in the lore, but I'm not forcing myself, hey, I'm going to go read this because I want to know more. It's, they present it to me, I understand it, then I ask Ethys later on.
Well, that's the position of most players, isn't it?
That's what I think. And that's why I try to base the show in that perspective instead of like hey, we're only going to talk about advanced deep lore, because half of that stuff passes over people's head, to be honest.
Yeah, I agree with that.
And so the first question, I kind of want to go back to FanFest, the patch, everything else. Or how much of that has actually been stuff that you expected? That you were like, hey, I knew this was going to happen. I knew they were going to say this. I knew this. We were going to go in this sort of direction. It was pretty obvious from what they said before. How predictable was it?
In terms of the trailer, like, no.
The trailer, and I guess let's go back one more though. Let's go back to the 4.4 patch and just say how much of that was predictable going through 4.4, the storyline. How much
of 4.4 was predictable?
Yeah.
Okay, so towards the end of 4.4, the story, we learn that Garlemald as an entire civilization was orchestrated by the Asians.
I did not pick that up, to be honest with you.
Okay. Well, that's fine.
That's
you know
fine.
what? Yeah. That's fine. That's all right.
All right.
You know what? Who cares? It doesn't even. So I'm disappointed in you, Frosty.
I'm sorry, it wasn't that obvious. So like I'm looking at the storyline, and by the way, there's gonna be lots of spoilers in the show if you haven't picked that up. So obviously, we were going, and then there's the king who came out in his ghost form or whatever, and he was talking to the current king, right? That was his son, and they were just like having this little cocky conversation, and I kind of picked up on some of the things he was saying, and then that was it, right? And then I assume the Asians, the Asians, the whatever you want to pronounce it as, were behind it in some way, right?
So Solus Galvus, the first emperor of Garlemald, was an Asian.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So basically what's happened, the Garlands, they can't use magic real well, and they're a very small population. And they used to have lots of nice land down in Othard and be a sort of, proud, industrious and wealthy people. But over the centuries, they've been slowly invaded and pushed further north until they're up in this frozen shithole corner of like the worst part of the world, with this, tiny little kingdom, which is constantly being besieged from all sides, and they're just sort of hanging in there until some guy comes along and just out of nowhere discovers ceruleum and discovers magitech and discovers all this Allergan stuff, and is like, hey guys, look, we got the means to fight back now, let's do it. And they're all like, okay, all right, sweet, fuck yeah. And so they make him emperor.
Okay.
And they follow him when he invades the neighboring countries,
Mm-hmm.
and the neighboring countries, neighboring countries, and the neighboring countries, neighboring countries, neighboring countries. And that all makes so much sense when you realize that he's an Ascian. And you realize that at no point did he try and sort of consolidate this stuff he was conquering. He just wanted to make chaos and make a mess, basically.
Okay.
And then he comes along the burn, and he makes this loud declaration of, primals did this. You hear that, everyone? Primals fucked us up. The one thing that can defeat us is primals. I'm so scared of primals.
Okay.
And so, everyone starts summoning primals. And we're like, why would you say that so loudly, Solus? You should have known that everyone's going to start summoning primals. But of course, like as an Ascian, that's exactly what he wants.
Right.
So all of these like weird discrepancies about Garlemald just suddenly like fell into place in 4.4. But none of it was anything that I'd predicted.
Okay.
It was insane.
So I guess the other question to go with that, if you didn't really predict that stuff happening, does it just seem, because from my understanding, when you're writing something, and I guess my experience of watching movies, right, and reading a couple of books and going through some various things of entertainment, the stories, they go in a couple of different paths. Either it's extremely predictable and it makes sense, or they're just saying, hey, I'm going to try to surprise the fuck out of you as much as I can. Do you think that it's in between those two, or it's kind of like just surprises to surprises?
It's definitely not surprises for the sake of surprises. Like, this isn't a retcon. This isn't something that they've just like thought of recently. Like, now that we know it, you go back and it makes sense. Because there was so much about like Garlemald that didn't make sense before. It's like this massively powerful empire that if they just got their shit together, they could easily like crush Eorzea in like a day, in an afternoon, and just go home. And they have so much trouble with like rebellions and stuff in the provinces, which they don't really try that hard to quell. And like, why don't they do that? And the simple answer is because, well, they don't want to. They want people to keep fighting. They want the world to sort of, keep being sort of chaotic and up in flames and all of that. So I think that it's usually fairly predictable, but every now and then they just have one of these bombshells like waiting in the wings to drop on us, that no one really expects. And it came at a point where we were sort of like so comfortable and thought that we knew what was going on, because like the last couple of patches before 4.4 were they were reasonably predictable in the stuff that was going on. And the stuff about like Xenos, his body disappearing, and then, Elidibus being in possession of it and all of that. Like, that was something that, even if it wasn't like the first guess that we had, it's something that we knew that was like on the cards, basically since the end of 4.0. So we got to the point where like, all right, no, we're cool. We know what's happening. Okay, we're on board. We can see the direction that we're moving in for the expansion. And then come 4.4 and come this trailer, it's just like, okay, all right, what is this?
It does seem kind of a surprise with the trailer and everything else, because it seems like we're going into this another like just complete flip of the script. Like, this is like completely out of it. Going from like the Warriors of Light to the Warriors of Darkness and everything, we're going into I don't know, just, I don't want to say like it seems like there's going to be another calamity or destruction of everything, but it feels like that, right?
Yeah, well, we've been told that ahead looms calamity. And we were told in the keynote that whatever this calamity is that is either going to happen or is, at a risk of happening, could be worse than the last one.
And the last one, now again, my ignorance, was Bahamut, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, the last one was Bahamut and Dalamud, and, the server's going offline for 3 years.
Yeah. I mean,
maybe...
Go ahead.
No, they're not going to go offline again.
No.
I was going to make a joke.
No. I mean, it's kind of interesting because I think people really enjoy that kind of type of storytelling where bad guys do win every once in a while, right? And bad things happen. Like, for example, Kefka is so popular because he destroyed the world, right? And so going back and seeing that, it gave us like a lot of passion going into 2.0 and it felt important to go through and defeat Bahamut. It felt good. When we start going into 3.0, we're like, this is interesting because we're exploring this new kind of place that we're cut off from, and this is great, but it's not the same thing. Then same thing going into the next one in Stormblood. But now we're approaching that point that we kind of had with Bahamut, and do you think that's going to reinvigorate, I guess, a lot of people to pay attention to what's going on?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, people tend to pay attention to spectacles. I'm not convinced that we are going to have another calamity, but if we keep being told that like there's a risk of it, everyone remembers Answers and remembers that scene.
Right.
And if we think that like something like that could happen again, then obviously people sort of sit up and listen. Like the new trailer was pretty hype for that reason. A lot of people are wondering if, it's not even like a post calamity and like the calamity happens next patch and we have to sort of spend 5.0 like picking up the pieces. There are a couple of people suggesting stuff about that. So yeah, I mean, I definitely think it gets people more invested in the story. I think so. I think a good example is Alexander, right? Alexander as opposed to Bahamut. We don't see Alexander like destroying the world or anything like that. And as a result, people were far less excited about Alexander's story than they were about Binding Coil, right? If you sort of pay attention to the cutscenes and you read the dialogue and stuff like that, you realize that Alexander is a big deal and is really, at risk of destroying the world and all that kind of stuff. But people don't really care unless they see it, unless they actually sort of see it happen.
Right.
So I think you're definitely right that having another calamity happen or something like that would definitely make people sort of sit up and pay attention.
I think I'm going to be honest with you. I think not just for the story, but just for the game, it wouldn't be a horrible thing for some sort of calamity to happen, but that takes a lot of programming to do because you have to go back and change things. Because right now, again, getting out of the story, just a player coming into the game, they have to go through all of that content, but then, I mean, they're losing content to make the experience better for new players, right? If they start crunching that down and then turning it into something kind of new with a new calamity like they did with the last one, which was 3 years of work, but maybe there's some way they could simplify that a little bit. I don't know.
Well, we were wondering about this for a long time, actually. Like, if there was another calamity that happened to Eorzea, what would happen? Would we have like pre-calamity and post-calamity instances for people that were at different points of the story? Like, how would you do that? It seems the answer here is that, well, it would just be localized somewhere else. So the calamity, rather than happening in Eorzea and affecting Eorzea geographically, would be happening in Ilzabad and would be affecting the zones that we haven't actually been to yet. So by the time we go to those zones for the first time, they've already been fucked up.
Okay. So the calamity is part of a different area that we're going out and we're exploring. When we go back to our part, we're not in a calamity.
Well, we are, but it hasn't like
affected
the land, the geography. It wouldn't have like changed the maps. Like NPCs and stuff like that are probably still reacting to it. You could probably, make some changes to like the weather and the skybox and all of that, which could be client side, I guess.
Right.
so that wouldn't give you a problem of having to like split the instance between like, you know, players that were up to date and like new players that hadn't gotten to that part of the story yet. Yeah. Whereas, you know, you could go to the new areas at Ilzabar and they could just be completely decimated and kind of give us that sort of desolate experience that we'd sort of expect to see from a localized Calamity.
Okay. Would they change up how the stories are running for new players when they're coming in, or would it be the same stuff?
I mean, I don't know. I don't think they would have to, would they?
Well,
I mean, NPCs will say different things depending on which patch you're at, right?
True. Okay. So just not move around some of the NPCs, kind of keep them where they would be otherwise.
Yeah, which is what we've been doing anyway up to this point.
Okay. I guess that kind of makes sense, but then that doesn't fix the issue of all the quests and everything else. You would have to find out some other way of reducing that leveling experience, I guess, for new players, right? Because that's still an issue for people coming into the game. But that was just a thought. Okay, so I'm gonna take it back a little bit and go back to you personally. So again, you said you've been doing this for like 3 years. So after reviewing all the lore and all the story and everything, do you think that it's getting better than how it was? It's still the same, or it's declining in any way?
Oh, that's a tough one. I think the story has been really, really good throughout. I don't think it hasn't gotten stale. That's the thing, is like when you're writing something that kind of spans over several years, like you'd think at some point it would sort of start to run out of traction and start to get a little bit stale and repetitive and uninspired, and you'd end up like repeating a lot of elements and stuff like that. And honestly, I don't feel like that's been happening, which is pretty extraordinary, right? Is that it is constantly fresh and they are surprising us every now and then. And I mean, I'm still invested, and a lot of people are still invested, which is a big ask for something that you're playing like nearly every day for 5 years, right?
Right. I mean, it's something that's difficult. I mean, okay, so when you say invested, the people who are paying attention are invested, right?
Well, I think a lot of the people that aren't paying attention are invested as well. That's the thing about like story and world building, is it's not something that you have to be paying attention to directly for it to affect your experience. Like people, when they first start playing the game, a lot of people that I speak to, they have this sense almost immediately of being immersed in this world, which is sort of consistent and real and actualized. And it's because of the amount of care and detail that's being put into that world building that they don't necessarily understand. They don't necessarily know anything about. But I feel like every player gets a sense of that. Like every new zone that we go to, whether or not you know anything about it, like going in, everyone does tend to get a sense of its coherence and its consistency, and the fact that there is like a lot of history and a lot of lore there, whether or not they read into it.
Well, just because they know it's there, so it feels more like a world that can be explored.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, that makes sense, I guess. So, but going back a little bit to that, where do you think? So you said you think the average player is where I'm at right now.
Yeah, more or less.
Okay. Where I care. I'm a little bit interested in what's going on. I like watching the main story cutscenes. So just to go down to some details about me, I watch the main story cutscenes. I watch the trial cutscenes, I'd say. I've watched the cutscenes and I've read the story. Okay, so I read most of the story too between the cutscenes and everything that's happening. And for the raid, which was a little bit more difficult, I think, for this raid. It was a little bit not as intriguing, but
there was a lot of it.
Yeah. But I mean,
particularly at the end, there was like a lot of bullshit with Alpha, and I was like, all right.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. And I guess they just wanted to sell Alpha plushies, man. I don't know if that was really it, but
I mean, it wasn't that simple. The thing is, like, so the big problem it turned out with Omega is that Omega didn't have a soul. It was a machine. Alpha was created by Omega. It was made from like Omega bits, and it didn't have a soul. But something about the journey that Alpha went through over the course of the Omega story, at the end, it turned out that it had developed a soul. It had sort of like grown a soul, and we were like, "Oh, that's okay. That's weird. Why did that happen?" So that was sort of like demonstrating that. And it was like, see, it's not through violence that we become human. It's through friendship and cooperation. And the power of friendship.
And overcoming violence, right? So violence did do something.
Shut up, Frosty.
Okay. But yeah, no, I've paid attention to that story. I don't pay attention to almost any of the job quest. Almost any of them.
Which is a shame. That's a real shame.
I paid attention to the main one. So the one that I paid attention to was the main one. The job I play, and I'm leveling up first. First one I get the 70. I'm paying attention to that job. So Paladin was it in this case. And then I don't, when I start leveling up other jobs, I'm just like, click, 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 click. I need to go as fast as possible to get to 70. I don't think about anything else, which I think is definitely something that's sad because missing out on stuff like the Dark Knight quest, which apparently was extremely good, happens to most players. Yeah. Most people do that.
That's good. That's good. They're all good.
They're all good.
Yeah.
Every single one of them.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. I want to say yes.
So so let's just say this. We have good story. We have everything else. How do you make the Frosties of the world watch and pay attention and read and absorb that story?
Well, I don't think you should have to. That's the thing. Like, I think it's okay that there are a lot of people that don't pay attention. That's not a problem. I'm not one of those people that's like, oh, how could you? I mean, I do it kind of like ironically, like I have a go at people that skip cutscenes, but I don't actually like, care.
Okay.
Like I say, story and world building, it's stuff that's worth doing and stuff that impacts the casual players, even though the casual players won't necessarily realize that it's impacting them. It's impacting their experience and their immersion and their like investment in the game and in the world. I don't think I when I was at PAX Australia, okay, this is a little bit of a tangent. When I was at PAX Australia, I saw this really, really good panel with a bunch of writers and world builders talking about how, you cater experiences to different kinds of players. And they used this really interesting analogy for players that are like invested in story and stuff like that. And they said that there were skimmers, there were swimmers, and there were divers. So there are people like you who just sort of like play the content, and any like story or world building that you come in direct contact with, you'll sort of like notice it on the peripheral and you'll be like, oh, that's neat. And you just kind of like keep going. And it's important to give players like you stuff that will kind of do that and give you that experience. Then it's also important to give stuff to people who will, read every cutscene and get invested and sort of care about the story and where the story is going. Those are the swimmers, right? And then there's the divers. There's people like me who want to know, the full history of every civilization going back, 5,000 years, 10,000 years. And it's important that when you're designing content is that you're catering to each of those different kinds of players that have these different levels of investment without making any one of them feel like they should be in another category, right? So I think it's important that skimmers don't feel like they're missing things, don't feel like they're kind of lost and clueless, and that they have to invest deeper because you won't necessarily want to. And if you suddenly feel like you're compelled, if I suddenly tell you like you're not going to get this mount or you're not going to be able to unlock this content or whatever unless you answer like a quiz on the lore of the game, you're going to be like, well, I guess I'm not getting that then. All right, fine. See you later. Like, I don't think that developers should feel like compelled to compel players to be more invested in story. Right. But if they are, then it should feel rewarding for them. You know what I mean?
Right. So basically, everybody's happy in some way, no matter what. So you're only forcing them to see like stuff that will keep them kind of entertained because they feel like they have an idea what's going on. Oh, I'm fighting a big dragon. Okay, cool.
And
Dragon.
if you want to know more,
yeah,
that's available. But if you don't want to know more, then you should be able to understand the context of fighting that dragon like immediately. Like you should not be confused.
Like he's going to destroy the world. I see a dragon. I need to kill it.
Yeah.
And then
I get
my world won't be destroyed. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. No, that makes a lot of sense.
Do you ever have moments in the game where like you feel like you are out of your depth and you just don't get it?
Half the cutscenes I ever watch usually will mention something, and they'll say a name, or they'll say a place, they'll say something, and I don't know what it is. I don't know what name they're referring to, or what person they're referring to, what place they're referring to. I just know they said it. And so this also happens, I think, when I'm not supposed to know. And it also happens sometimes when I'm supposed to know, and it should have an effect. And it's hard for me to differentiate those two different situations. But it does make me kind of curious. Okay, now I need to know what, for example, when you're leveling up the first time, they say a lot of shit that makes no sense if you don't know anything about the game.
Yeah, it just flies right over your head.
Yeah. And you start asking yourself, okay, well, I need to pay attention to what this name means, so next time it comes up, I can build more context and develop what this is, and kind of build into what Garlemald or whatever is, what a Garlean is. I start building context into what these different things are. And that happens going throughout the story, which sometimes can wear you down. It can.
Yeah, I think like ARR, like 2.0 in particular, it has probably way too much of that kind of stuff. Way too many like threads which they sort of put in front of the player while you're leveling, and they're like, pay attention to this, is going to be important later. Whereas like for a new player, you just want to get to an end game, right? You don't really care about that so much. And I think the experience of most players that do start to get invested in story and lore is that a lot of that goes over your head the first time, and like you have to go back. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And like take a second look at it. I feel like with Heaven's Ward and with Stormblood, everything has been like a lot more approachable in the MSQ. And a lot of like the denser stuff, they've just kind of like sequestered into side stories.
Right.
Whereas in A Realm Reborn, like everything was in the main story. Like you're taking all these tangents during the main story to do these, funny little esoteric things, and then coming back to the main story. Whereas they've kind of learned that like that's not for everyone, and hey, maybe we should put the Warring Triad in its own side story, and maybe we should put all the primals in their own side stories, like with the Four Lords and all of that, and like people only need to pay as much attention to that as they want to, right?
So I do agree with you, though. I do agree that Heaven's Ward and Stormblood, that's very approachable going through that whole story while you're doing that leveling experience and everything else. It's just sad that most people can't get to that point. They can't make it past the first part. So let's just say I have friends that want to start the game, and I want them to enjoy the story at some point, but I also want them to make it to relevant parts of the story instead of getting bogged down at the very beginning. Do you recommend anybody buy that jump potion or the story potion?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah?
Absolutely. Yeah. I'd say get the jump potion, get the story potion, or level through as quickly as you can. And if you find yourself invested in the story later, like there's plenty of ways you can go back and catch up and experience that. I mean, we've got New Game Plus coming in 5.0, so that's a way like when you get to end game, you can go back and play through A Realm Reborn, but like scaled up to level 70. And experience all that story that way. Or you can watch videos, or you can like read write-ups and stuff like that. There's plenty of resources out there.
Right.
So yeah, definitely, if you want to skip story to get to end game, yeah, definitely do it, of course.
Okay. Because I want people to keep going. I want them to play the game and keep going afterwards, but we know that that one little area bogs everybody down. It feels weird because you kind of have to tell them to do that too, right? It's not something that's obvious. They just start to experience it once they hit that point. But they're working on that, I think, too, how to speed up the very beginning of the game.
Yeah, they definitely are.
Okay. Do you think that... So basically, you answered that question earlier, where basically everybody, they kind of write the story in a way that you can entertain or make the most people happy. So I guess this is just a follow-up question that may or may not make sense. Do you think having all these different stories makes it kind of hard for the average player to want to stay invested overall in the stories in the game? For example, the raid storyline, the trial storyline, the 24-man storyline, the main quest storyline, the Hildebrand storyline, and so on.
Well, I mean, they are all separate, which they weren't in A Realm Reborn, and that was a bit of a problem, was that all the primals were wrapped up in the MSQ. The 24-man was kind of wrapped up in the MSQ. Coil was like absolutely wrapped up in the MSQ. And that made it difficult. Like if people wanted to care about the story of one thing, they had to care about the story of everything else.
Right.
You know? And that was like a big commitment. Whereas now it's like there's plenty of people that are interested in the MSQ but are not really interested in like the Omega stuff, and they don't have to be. And same with like the Four Lords, they're quite like they sort of like feed into each other, but they're not so like inextricably kind of tied up that you can't understand anything without understanding everything else. So I don't know, what has your experience been like? You say you've been paying attention to the MSQ but not so much to Omega or to the job quests.
Well, I mean, I paid attention
to
Omega.
Does the MSQ still make sense?
The main story quest, I make sure that I pay attention to it because it's the core of the game to me. That's the core of what's happening and what I'm going to next, where I'm going. And so it's important for me to understand where I'm going, for me to care about where I'm going, if that makes any sense. And so doing the raid, I try to pay attention to that too, because I kind of want to care about the bosses that I'm fighting. That didn't happen with Omega.
Well, it didn't happen because there's no real story behind the bosses that you're fighting.
No, it's just like, hey,
apart from Midgard, Zormer, and Omega itself, anyway.
Yeah, I mean, it was just like, hey, here's a boss that we thought would be cool to fight, and this is challenging. Here you go. And I feel like that sucked a lot because I didn't care that I had to go through this. Alexander, I at least had some idea that it would be important to stop him, because paying attention, you get tired of the goblin stuff after a while. I don't know, you sigh every time you see the goblins in the cutscene. You're like, well, now we have to incorporate them somehow into the storyline when we're going through and we're trying to beat robots, and which they're starting up Alexander or whatever, and then you fight Alexander because he can go back in time and change history and everything else. But it felt like I had a goal, like something was important in the end. And Omega was just like, we'll just keep you fighting bosses until you can fight Omega.
Yeah, that's basically. Well, Omega was literally like, hey, you're going to fight me, and if you don't, then I'm going to do bad stuff to the world.
Right.
Like, okay, call us when you need us.
Yeah.
That was basically it.
Coil. That, of course, was part of the entire reason for everyone coming back into the game, was defeating Bahamut because he destroyed the world, and that made sense. So, honestly, that was probably one of the most important storylines, and I don't think they can match it up even if they destroy the world again, it won't match up to that. Even if they do that, because that was a whole experience and journey for everybody who was invested in the game. This other one is just, it's over now. And so it's kind of weird seeing what they can do for the raid story going forward. I do want them to incorporate the main story in some way, but it's
kind of a double-edged sword. Like the Coil story was great, but the people that didn't or couldn't do Coil were really, really salty that it was so good and was so important. They're like, oh, something that important, it should be in the MSQ. It shouldn't be in this raid content that only like, a handful of people will ever do or can ever do. Whether or not that's true is,
Well, I mean, that's over now. Normal mode fixes that. It's done.
Yeah. Well, it It doesn't. That's the thing. Like it certainly helps a lot, but there's still a lot of people that do not or will not do normal mode raids, and will be like, no, my character doesn't do that. That's too important to have in side content, you know. Um, so we need to kind of find a balance between being like tied in and relevant to the MSQ and being like, you know, inextricable from the MSQ, that the MSQ doesn't make sense without you doing it, you know. Whereas like for Realm Reborn, a lot of the raid content, a lot of the side content, stuff in the MSQ later doesn't really make sense if you haven't done it.
And that makes sense. I understand that point. I understand that point completely. But I feel like normal mode at this point should be like just part of the experience of all players who are part of the game. It's just an MMO, and you have to work with seven other people to clear content every once in a while.
Oh yeah, I completely agree. Like, I mean, I'm of the opinion that like all story is MSQ.
Okay.
You just unlock different bits of it here and there. Like Warring Tri is absolutely MSQ as far as I'm concerned. Coil's MSQ, Alexander's MSQ, Omega's MSQ. Like, you know, at what point is the Warrior of Light going to be like hearing from Sid that Omega has disappeared, and just be like, all right, not my problem. I don't care. That's fine. That thing that we saw on Belsal's War with Omega fighting Shinryu in that epic battle, and both of them have just disappeared. I don't give a shit. Like, whatever. Someone else's problem. Like, how are we not going to resolve that? You know, like that's absolutely like. But again, you just can't like compel people or make people feel like if they don't do it that they're somehow not good warriors of light.
I would say that's
how people felt with Coil. They're like, well, it makes me feel shitty. Like, makes me feel like I haven't done, you know, my job if I didn't defeat Bahamut. And I'm like, well, that's because you didn't, did you?
It's true. It's true.
You should feel like that.
I mean, I want to go into the story, and I want to say, hey, I'm doing this raid, and I'm going through this important part of the entire game, and I'm working with other people and against this big boss, and not just going into a dungeon. All right, we just did a dungeon with a few friends. We saved the world.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel right to me. It just doesn't add up. But again, that's me wanting the story to feel like it has more importance or impact to the overall game instead of just it feels like the main story is a side part of the game, if that makes any sense, because it's not even remotely, you don't think about it. You just go in and you press a couple buttons and you're done with it.
You don't think about the MSQ.
I mean, I do, but I feel like it's put off to the side as something that you don't have to really put any thought into when you're doing it.
Yeah, I get that. And again, I think that comes back to the point about like, you know, skimmers and swimmers and divers, is that the skimmers don't feel like they're being, you know, guilt tripped or feel like they're missing out if they don't care that much. But if they do start to care that much, it's rewarding.
Okay.
Right? So it's like a really kind of difficult balance, right? So like the raid content, it seems to me that like what you're saying, so for Omega example, is that it's rewarding for swimmers, it's rewarding for people that like, you know, absorb all of the dialogue and stuff like that, and then sort of like put together the pieces and understand the context and how important it is, how significant it is. But for people that are just like rolling through it, they're like, why do I care about this? That was a huge problem with Alexander. And I feel like they helped out a little bit with Omega because we had that scene with like Omega and Shinryu, we got to see what Omega was capable of. So people that aren't really paying attention beyond just like, you know, the surface kind of visual stuff can still be like, oh, this is a big deal. Oh, isn't this cool? Let's get in there. But you reckon that wasn't enough for Omega?
I don't know, man. I don't know. To be honest, I'm of a different kind of mindset. I played MMOs when I was a child, and it was different back then, right? It was content. It was part of the game, and you had to just be good to clear it. And then if you couldn't clear it by the expansion, okay, well, you just go into the next expansion. But it's different for me for some reason. Like when I first, I don't know, there's other games where there's a new raid that came out. Maybe I can't remember if WoW is one of these examples, but I remember just doing it a patch before everyone else. I don't think, I don't remember if I cleared T9 before I started going into, while T10 was released, right? So people were still working on T9 and they were still behind in that tier trying to clear all that content going into the next tier. And I didn't feel like that was a problem. It was just eventually you would clear it because you would get ridiculous gear anyways.
Yeah, and then you go through the next one.
Yeah.
Yeah, but people are so mad about that, about the idea that you had to clear each previous tier before you could do the next one. Because, you know, there's new players coming into the game at like 2.4, and they have to somehow find a group to do first coil and second coil before they can do the current raid content. And, you know, I get why that's frustrating. Yeah. But, yeah, I kind of agree with you. Like, the old school mindset is like, well, you just start at the beginning and you do the content.
Yeah.
And you go through it. You just progress through it. And that's just what it is. But the thing is, like, turn 5 and then turn 9 were like such massive obstacles to people that wanted to do like current end game raids, people that were just getting to end game, and it was like really, really difficult. Like I remember when we were trialing like new static members for turn 10, like we had to carry them through turn 9 first.
Yeah,
and that'd be really hard because, like, you know, it's a fight that you can't when you're you know, sort of like at level 50 and don't necessarily have the best gear. You're maybe, you know, I-120. It's still a really, really difficult fight to sort of, you know, get people to work out how to clear in just 1 or 2 lockouts.
Right. All right. We'll get off that for now. We'll get off that. I want to get into actually getting more into the core story of everything here. I mean, again, I do want them to kind of change up a little bit and make raids feel more important, but that's just my preference, right? It's not everybody's preference. But going back, you were telling me you weren't really expecting kind of how the story was laying out, or how they were going to do 4.4 storyline and going into Storm or Shadowbringers. It was kind of a surprise. Yeah. Do you have any kind of expectations about what we'll see going into 4.5 because of what we've seen already?
Yeah, okay. So we know that the 4.5 MSQ dungeon is called the Gimlet Dark. And we have some concept art for that. And the concept art is almost definitely the same location as where we're fighting Xenos in the trailer. So it seems like that action there is going to be occurring in 4.5. Whatever the outcome of that is, I don't think we can necessarily speculate too much on at the moment. But we're going to be going into a battlefield with a shitload of, you know, decimated Garleans and Alliance, and we're going to be fighting Xenos or Xenolitibus, whichever one it is, mano a mano. And whatever happens there is going to have a huge sort of resonating impact on moving into Shadowbringers and this, you know, potential calamity that we're coming into. So a lot of people seem to think that we're going to destroy Elidibus permanently, or we're going to kill Xenos. We're going to, you know, defeat the Empire there at Gimlet Dark, and that is going to have a huge problem. So with the Warrior of Darkness, again, this was like way out of left field, the idea of us having to become the Warrior of Darkness. It's something that's like always been on the table, but has been like so unlikely that no one would have kind of taken it that seriously.
Well, I mean, we saw the Warrior of Darknesses already, right? And we're like,
yeah, right, yeah, exactly.
Okay, this is kind of corny, cheesy, whatever. On to the next thing, and we never see him again.
Well, I mean, it's not a case of us never seeing them again. They've kind of been in the sidelines a lot.
Really?
Yeah. We know that basically what's going on their world now is that they were at risk of a flood of light, and that Minfilia has had to go back there to sort of help them try and fix that up. So they became the Warriors of Darkness, right? Because in their world, on the first shard, they defeated the Ascians. They won. basically.
Mhm.
And that put everything out of balance. And as a result, there's this risk of this flood of light sort of coming in and wiping out their world because there's an absence of darkness and evil and chaos to sort of balance, the light, what they've done there.
Mhm.
So people think that if we're becoming the warrior of light in our world, it must be because we're having a similar problem. And people are sort of extrapolating from that. Well, what have we done to sort of win so hard that this is at risk of happening? Did we defeat Elidibus? Did we defeat the Asians? Did we defeat the Garlands? Did the Alliance do something stupid like, summon the 12 and did that destroy the Garlands? And now that's at a risk of causing another calamity or whatever. Basically, the strongest speculations we can make is that something is going to happen in 4.5 where we are going to basically tip the balance so hard and decimate like the forces of darkness so hard that we need to sort of compensate for that by, taking the other side, basically.
Okay. So I have a question. So what if that happens? What if we win so hard? What kind of horrible world would we live in where it's the light that just is so overwhelming? Or do we all have to just like pay our taxes and be good people?
No.
Or like what's the
No, we would have this light that would start somewhere and slowly expand and delete everything.
So it's just like like some sort of spell or some sort of like
No.
like it just
It would just, reality would just fall apart, basically. Like the
Okay.
world would just evaporate. And there would be this sort of expanding, like it's called a flood of light. You would literally see on the horizon, if it was approaching you, you would just see white, like nothingness. And when it gets to you, you get deleted and your family gets deleted and everything there isn't there anymore.
And so this can happen the same way with the darkness side. If it gets too much, then
Well, that's what the void is.
okay.
The void is a world where that's happened with darkness, and there's just like a couple of remnants left alive, and the things that are still alive have sort of been twisted into into void set. That's what they are. Whereas Code just told us the flood of light is a little bit different. Whereas like the flood of darkness like leaves some bits behind, the flood of light would leave nothing, like absolutely nothing.
So I'm trying to. I guess this goes into a lot deeper lore than I understand. So we have the multiple gods out there, and then we have the two main ones, the chaos one and the light one,
Well,
right?
we may or may not have multiple gods out there. They may or may not be real. They're probably not real. We have Hydaelyn and Zodiac. That's what we know for sure.
All right, Hydaelyn and Zodiac. Okay, and one's the light, and then one's the darkness or the chaos. And them kind of mashing together keeps reality whole.
Yeah, basically. That's probably the simplest way to explain it.
Okay, and then if one's just like beats up the other one completely, then it deletes everything. Why does Hydaelyn want to delete everything? Like, is that
Hydaelyn doesn't want to delete everything.
Okay.
So it's tough. The Asians want that to happen. Well, they don't want that to happen. They want there to be enough chaos on our worlds that it sort of destroys the other worlds and causes these rejoinings where those worlds get like folded back into our world, right? Hydaelyn wants to make sure that there's enough order for that not to happen, but not so much that it causes this flood of light and like deletes everything. Whereas Zodiac and the Asians, they want to cause enough chaos so that it forces these rejoinings and these dimensions to be compressed back together, but not so much that it deletes everything.
Okay.
So it's this really kind of tenuous balance between, too much chaos and not enough chaos and deleting the world on this side or deleting the world on that side. So Hydaelyn doesn't want that to happen. If that starts happening, it's because we fucked up.
Okay.
So we're gonna fuck up in 4.5. We're gonna fuck up like in a major way.
So this seems like a little bit more massive than I thought it was, because I thought we were like, okay, we're the good guys, we have the good god, they're the bad guys, they have the bad god, good evil kind
Well, that's
of thing.
what it's been so far. It's
Right.
like we're on the force of light, they're on the force of darkness. We keep fighting each other and everything's cool, right?
Mhm.
If they killed us, then suddenly it wouldn't be cool anymore because there would be nothing to stop all these primals and all this horrible shit that's constantly going on, which is what the Ascians need us to do. On the flip side, we want to defeat the Ascians. That's what we've been talking about. That's what the Alliance is talking about. It's what the Scions are talking about. It's like, we need to destroy the Ascians.
Right.
But we know from the outside, we know that that would have the same effect, is that suddenly, well, there would be nothing to stand against us.
Okay.
And the same thing would happen, is that it would just fuck up everything.
Okay.
So that's what people are worried about with this idea of like another calamity happening or a flood of light or something to that effect, is that we're going to defeat the Ascians and we're going to have this moment where we're like, oh, we did it. We won. And it's going to be like, well, no, actually you fucked up like really, really bad. And you weren't supposed to do that. And now there's a flood of light and you're the only one that's left that can deal with that because you killed the other guys that were dealing with that.
Okay, so we kill those guys, and then this light starts to come. How do we stop the light?
Well, presumably by becoming the Warrior of Darkness.
So we just say we're the Warrior of Darkness now, and
again, if this happens, if this is how it happens, it's not self-evident that this happens. But if it does, then we would have to start sowing chaos.
Mm-hmm.
We would have to start like inciting wars and making sure that people aren't getting along too well.
Do we just go kill a whole bunch of people and that would piss people off? Like if we just like turn into a Dark Knight and we just go in through towns where like, hey, I'm your friend, and we stab them with a knife and then we start creating chaos because of that?
Well, I mean, yeah, okay. Yeah. I mean, obviously killing them isn't going to help, but it's more like, the end of The Dark Knight, right? Where there's this whole bit about like, Batman.
Which I watched.
Yeah, Batman having to become an antagonist in the eyes of the people, even though we're not literally antagonists. It's like people need to be sort of afraid of Batman, and Batman has to like be the bad guy or whatever. It's kind of like that, I guess, where it would be sufficient for people to think that we've kind of turned bad, and to sort of, like unite them against us or something like that would probably be sufficient. Again, we don't know that this is how it's going to happen. We're just really speculating here. There's any number of things that could happen here or ways that could happen.
Okay, so becoming Batman's one.
Yeah, becoming Batman is one of them. Yeah,
okay,
that's definitely one of them.
Okay. So that seems a lot more intense, because that would be more than a calamity, right? Deleting everything.
Yeah. It would. I think it would be a calamity as well as this risk of it becoming much, much worse.
Okay.
Like we'd probably get a calamity to start with, and then we'd get reality sort of starting to unravel.
Okay.
If it went down this path.
So in the trailer with Shadowbringers, were we fighting Hydaelyn, or was that just?
We were fighting a Kuriboh.
Okay.
So what we were fighting is the boss from Amdapor hard mode. At least it looks like it. But the difference between this and that is that, well, this thing's kicking our ass. It's much more powerful.
Well, there's only one of us. There's not four of us. So.
Well, I've soloed it. Okay. Like it's a level 60 dungeon.
Okay, fair.
We should be all right. We should be fine.
Okay.
But that's a statue, right? And this thing's not a statue. This thing's got like skin, it's got eyes, it's got hair. Like it's definitely not a statue. So a lot of people are kind of wondering like, why are these Amdapor things showing up? Are we in Amdapor? Is something happening in Amdapor? And then there's actually an entry on it in the new law book.
Oh yeah, they said so in chat here.
Yeah, on this statue. So let me find that for you real quick. Which is really, really telling. Where are we? Snowcloak, Velocity, Amdapor. Here we go. Okay, so Kuriboh. This is about the statue, about the golem. It says, created by Amdapori Magi to protect their city, this winged golem is animated by gems infused with power of white magic. To better contend with Void Scent, it is said to have been made in the image of transcendent beings from yet another plane.
So it's an angel.
Something like that, yeah.
Okay.
The Kuribu that we're fighting in the trailer is the Kuribu that the Amdapori Kuribu is like based on.
Okay.
It could be a few things. It could be an angel, like a literal angel.
Right.
It could be like a light void sense. It could be that this flood of light is kind of transforming things into these like light aspected void scent, kind of like how the flood of darkness created the void scent that we sort of know and have fought
the
before.
Demons of sort, right?
Yeah. So it could be that a flood of light is creating these more angelic looking monsters, and that we're having to fight those as a result of this like pending flood of light. It could be, and this is like serious spitballing, like real left field speculation. It could be that it's Halone.
Halone, yeah.
It could be that the Kuribu is a depiction of Halone, and we could extrapolate from there that maybe the Eorzean Alliance summoned the 12 to defeat the Garlands, because the Garlands are, you know, so much better manned and resourced than we are or we ever could be. That, you know, the Alliance are going to have to do something pretty extreme to be able to beat them. And with the Scions sort of all out of commission in this kind of, you know, coma that they've been put in, and not sort of performing their role as the primal police like they generally do. And then maybe, you know, the Alliance could be compelled to summon the 12. And the thing is, like, we as the Warrior of Light would then have to say to the Alliance, like, hey, you guys done fucked up. Like, why did you summon the 12? We're going to have to go and fight the 12 now. We're going to have to, like, destroy them to sort of make sure the world doesn't fall apart or cause another calamity or whatever. And that could be another reason for us turning, you know, to the darkness, is that we're not so much becoming evil as we're just having to become antagonistic to the Eorzeans in destroying their gods that they stupidly summoned to defeat the Garlands. That could be another thing. Or it could be, as a lot of people have been suggesting, as I think it's probably the most likely thing, is that they're just trying to create through this trailer this this sort of symbolism of us fighting against the light, and that they just took random assets from the game and were like, this thing looks like an angel. This thing's light. So for the Heaven's Ward trailer, right? We fight like 1,000 different Hreisvelgers. They're all like invading Ishgard. And Hreisvelger, obviously, there's only one of him. But the animators that were making the trailer were given this asset, and they were like, this dragon. Yeah, we'll just copy and paste that like 1,000,000 times and just use that, and it'll give people an idea what's going on. The scene in Heaven's Ward trailer, it never happens in the game. It never actually happens. And, you know, people sort of noticed that during Heaven's Ward, and they were like, yo, what the fuck's up with this? And the explanation we got is that, like, they used the model for Hreisvelger, like, over other models that they probably should have used. And it was just like a sort of communication error. And by the time, like, Oda and Yoshida and Koji, like, saw the trailer, they were like, it was, like, too late to sort of fix it. The Stormblood trailer, like, the stuff we see in the Stormblood trailer, that does actually happen. But, again, there is a precedent, so we've got to be prepared to entertain the idea that this fight with this Kuribu does not actually happen at any point, or if it does, it's like nowhere near as significant as they're making it out to be, and they're just like attributing so much more significance to it because it's symbolic of this fight against light and dark, and of us having to sort of take the adverse side.
Okay. All right. That got a lot bigger than I thought it was going to be honest with you. I thought that was...
It always does.
Yeah. All right. So other things that we should be paying attention to in the story. So there's lots of other characters. Some of them are a little bit interesting. Some of them maybe we're not really noticing too much. Are there what are the obvious characters we need to be paying attention to during a story to kind of see it develop? Who are the big players in the upcoming next patch and expansion?
The obvious ones are Solace and Varus, and I want to say Gaius as well.
Okay.
I'm sorry. A Shadow Hunter, not Gaius.
Right. It's pretty obvious. I guess it is Gaius for you.
It is definitely Gaius. Yeah.
Okay.
The other pretty obvious one is the whole theme of the Black Rose, this chemical weapon that scientists that were working for Gaius sort of developed, but he sort of like buried this research and made sure that it was never going to be used. But as we saw in 4.4, it's like it's being used against people by the Garlands. It's basically like a chemical weapon. It's like chlorine gas or something.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's going to become a big deal. That's going to be a huge one. Yeah, the obvious ones are all pretty obvious. I think the less obvious one might be this weird Ellison that we saw a couple of patches ago that people are thinking might be Xenos. Like someone's taken, Elidibus has taken Xenos' body. So Xenos has taken some rando's body.
Okay.
Yeah, because it talks like Xenos.
Mm-hmm.
It's got like a katana, which is weird for an Ellison, but it's just like this random Ellison, and it appeared once, and we've never seen it again. But that's one that we definitely need to look out for.
Is that the one who was peeking around the corner when we were looking at Xenos' grave? No, or is that something else?
No, that was something else.
Okay.
This is the one that at the end of 4.2 or 4.3? I think it was 4.3. Anyway, he's like rummaging through some like Garland wreckage. He's wearing a Alamegan resistance outfit, and some other resistance soldier comes up to him and is like, "Oh, what are you doing there?" And he kills the other resistance soldier.
Oh, yeah.
Flies off in a little Magitech thing, like, yeah.
Right. I think I remember this.
Yeah. We need to watch out for that guy. Whoever the fuck he is, may or may not be Xenos, but we need to watch out for him.
Why would Xenos not be dead? Was he a scion?
He was dead.
Okay. So
but he's got the Echo.
Oh, okay. So he can take over someone else's body.
So when you've got the Echo and your body dies, so for normal people, if your body dies, your soul just sort of like disintegrates into the ether. Mm-hmm. But there's this quality of the Echo where your soul is like hard and like stays together. You don't need a body. Like you can exist without a body. And you can either create another body out of ether, or you can possess another body, like basically like the Ascians do.
Okay.
So everyone that has the Echo has that sort of quality to them. So it's possible that Xenos, collected himself in the live stream and was like, "All right, where's my body at? Ah, shit, someone else is using my body. Ah, damn it. All right, what am I gonna do? I guess I'll take this one."
Is that what happens every time we use a Fantasia?
No. What happens when we use a Fantasia? So okay. Koji's actually answered this question, is that we don't transform. We actually just like our self-perception transforms. It's like drinking a Fantasia gives us like the courage and the clarity to see ourselves at how we want to be, but we don't actually change.
Okay. Do we know what do we look like Derplander? Is that who we actually look like?
No, I think we just look like whatever we started as.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So if you start as Lalafell, you're stuck. Sorry. That's how everyone else sees you.
Yeah. Okay. So let's see. So this is one of my last questions before I get into viewer questions here that I want to ask you. Do you think it's a wise move? Because the Ascians have been around forever. They've always been lingering. They're puppet masters. They've been doing crazy stuff. They're the bad guys. Mm-hmm. And it looks like we're going to an end with them, right? We're getting to our big confrontation. It looks like that. Would it be a wise move to actually finish that part of the story and defeat them? Or should they just always be in the background of Final Fantasy XIV?
So I think Yoshida was talking about this quite recently. Where he's saying that he was also concerned that like the end of the Ascians and the end of this current story arc with Ascians and the Garlands might like spell an end for the game, and people might have trouble like being interested in anything that comes after that. And to the point where he was even considering like having a whole expansion where we just took some tangents away from the Ascian storyline so that it would still be there like when we came back. But he has said that this expansion seems like it's going to be like the defeat of the Garlands and perhaps the defeat of the Ascians as well. I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing. It just means that we can go on and we can tell other stories. Like there's lots of other stories to be told.
I mean, that's true, but I'm mainly referring to the effect that World of Warcraft had when they finished up Wrath of the Lich King.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know how familiar you are. I keep forgetting you.
Vaguely.
Wow. Okay, so going through Warcraft, the main guy was Arthas that you're trying to beat and destroy.
Yeah.
And once you do that in the MMO, they have to start putting things in there that you're just like, well, I had no thought of this person. I didn't Deathwing. Okay, I guess it's deep in story somewhere. Now it's here,
Right.
but it wasn't something that you were like, oh, this is clear that's a bad guy. This is clear that this is an ambition that I need to do, or this is one of my ambitions. And so they're giving you new story, and the story could be good and everything, but it's not.
It just feels like disjointed.
Yeah, it doesn't feel like, well, I'm still trying to go for that anymore. So if they take away the science that we all kind of got to know and get used to, they have to put something else there that we care about. And would it just feel like, oh, well, we're just going into something else that's just I will never care as much about as I'm caring about these guys?
Well, that's the tough thing. So again, the difference between WoW and 14 is that it seems like for WoW, particularly in more recent expansions, the story and the world building has always come like second. It's been like content has been developed, and then we're like, all right, so we need a story for this as a vehicle. Like, story team, get on it. Whereas I think that if we do start to move away from the Ascians and the Garleans and into like a new kind of story, it's going to be one that is sort of like at the ground floor of the development of this new direction of this new content, and it's going to be something that does sort of like transition. I think that when we start to see us moving in another direction away from that, we're going to discover that like seeds have been planted for it for years already.
Okay.
We're going to like, our attention is going to be drawn to stuff that happened in Heaven's Ward or happened in A Realm Reborn, and we're going to be like, oh shit, oh okay, I get, because that's what it's been like up to this point. It's always been like that. I don't think it's going to stop being like that. I don't think they're going to change the way that they're writing stories or they're setting up this narrative. So I have a lot of confidence that whatever comes after the Ascians is something that has already been like fleshed out and is something that they've already been sort of like setting up for. You know what I mean?
Can you think of what that is? If there
Nope.
would.
Nope. I think it's going to be something to do with Mericidia or something to do with the New World. Again, there have been like little seeds planted for each of those. But beyond that, I couldn't really speculate much as to what it would be and what like the new sort of antagonistic force would be.
Okay.
It's just tough to imagine like if the Ascians are defeated, if Zodiac is defeated, then like it's really hard to imagine where we go from there.
Okay.
Because that's like a whole aspect of the universe, you know? It's not just like the big bad guy. It's like literally half of the universe is Zodiac.
Yeah. So, well, I mean, because we're bringing that to the forefront too, right? We're bringing on the Zodiac and we're bringing on Hydaelyn. What's above that?
Nothing. As far as we know, nothing. There's nothing above that.
Okay. Yeah, I guess
there could be like new champions of Zodiac and of Hydaelyn after the Ascians are defeated. There could be like a new thing that Zodiac uses as a vehicle, a new champion, a new tool, something like that. But yeah, don't know.
Okay. We do have a question here, and by the way, if you guys want to get questions in, please ask them now. This is your chance. Let's see. Yeah, you can just click on that link, and then you can submit any questions that you have for Ethys here about story or lore, and we'll see kind of what you guys have. One question that we got kind of earlier in the show, and it took a little bit, but this is from Tom Barian. They want to know what predictions we may have for any upcoming primals based on the known themes we have of Shadowbringers.
Ooh. Okay. I really want to fight the 12.
You really
That's
want
what I
to
want.
12? Okay.
Yeah. I want to fight the 12 as primals. And again, that would sort of fit the theme, right? Is that all the primals we've been fighting to date have been like other, you know, they haven't been Eorzean. Well, they haven't been of the, you know, Eorzean alliance. They've been, you know, of beast tribes. They've been of, you know, like other nations or you know, like antagonistic sort of elements. So I want primals of gods that we've always considered to be, you know, on the good side, right? These sort of like, you know, like the
goody
the
two
12.
shoes, the goody two shoes of the 12, yeah.
Well, they're not goody two shoes, but they're supposed to be like on our side, right? And this idea of Shadowbringers, of us becoming antagonistic to things that, you know, we haven't been to before, the 12 would sort of fit in there, and I think that would be really cool.
Okay.
Other than that, I honestly don't know.
I mean, how would you even make the 12 fit within the expansion? Can't.
What, just being so many of them?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. It would have to be MSQ.
Okay.
Right? The MSQ would have to be like largely centered around this idea of us going through and fighting the 12, and a lot of them would have to be like, you know, dungeon bosses. Or, you know,
the 8-man warrior 8.
Yeah, well, not all of them could be 8-man trials, right? You couldn't have 12 8-man trials through an MSQ. Okay. Or maybe you could.
But putting them into like tier 1.
Oh, putting into the
savage,
right?
Yeah,
putting them into
12.
the 8-man, right? Yeah, I mean, yeah, they would fit in that. But then it's like, okay, well, what's the MSQ doing then? That would have to go in a different direction.
Pointing you into the raid.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. Is like you'd have to have a much clearer attachment between the MSQ and the raid story,
right?
And I don't know how keen people would be on that.
Okay. Another question here from BH Picasso. I know that Iceheart didn't become the real Shiva, so what was she, and what about the other primals we fought?
This is tough because I thought I had a really clear understanding of this until recently. So what I would have told you a couple of weeks ago is that Iceheart was just like she took the form that the believers thought that Shiva would have, right? It's that she was not in any part the real Shiva. She's just something that looked like what they thought Shiva looked like and was called Shiva and had these abilities they thought Shiva would have. And I think Koji's actually talked in the past about the fact that Shiva the Primal has a lot of similarities with Halone and the way Halone is depicted, because it's Ishgardians that are worshipping her, and they've got these ideas of what divinity looks like, and it kind of looks like Halone. So when they summon a primal, it has these, you know, particular qualities. But Koji, during the lore panel, he answered specifically with Bahamut, is that when Bahamut was resummoned as a primal, it actually had like bits of Bahamut's original ether. It had like little pieces of his soul that was sort of like, you know, mashed up with all of these other, you know, bits into this weird sort of, you know, chimerical monstrosity that was not the original Bahamut, but had little bits of the original Bahamut kind of mashed into it, right?
Okay.
So it could have been that Shiva, in that case, did have like little bits of the original Saint Shiva that were kind of drifting around the live stream, that were kind of pulled out and like mashed into this form with all of this other shit, all of these, you know, images of what the summoners thought that it was going to look like, of what Iceheart thought it was going to look like. It's just a whole mess. Apparently, it's just a complete mess. So again, up until now, I've always understood that like when you summon a primal, it doesn't ever have to have been a real thing. And I still think it doesn't necessarily have to have been a real thing. But if you're summoning a primal of something that was at one point a real thing, it seems like you can expect it to have like just a little sliver of what that real thing was, like mashed in there somewhere.
Okay. That's a pretty interesting answer. I've never thought of it exactly like that.
Yeah, it's a mess.
Okay.
It's basically a mess.
Okay, next question here from Serial. Is our power still light aspected? We've had crystals of light since 2.0. If that's the case, we may be unable to battle light sent.
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. So our crystals of light are it seems that they're basically just very, very pure crystals of different elemental aspects. Like, we've got a fire one, we've got an ice one, we got ones of all the major elements, right? And I think it's safe to assume that those are like shifted towards. So light and darkness, they're not elements, they're like poles. So you can have like something that's fire elemented, and it can either be aspected towards umbral or astral, which is dark or light.
Right.
And I think it's safe to assume that our light crystals are all like, of an astral polarity. So yeah, I think you could say that our power is still in that case, like largely light aspected. But as for the light void scent, well, I mean, the traditional void scent that we've been fighting, they're not necessarily like umbrally aspected. Like void scent are, it's like a mutation that's been caused by a lack of ether of any kind. They've sort of been transformed into these creatures that just like have this hunger, and they will feed on anything that has any kind of ether, whether it's light or dark or of any particular element. Like, they don't care, they're not fussy. So you'd think that light void scent would be basically the same. And they wouldn't necessarily have to be, combated with like, umbral ether. Okay. That said, there could be an important component to like balancing the world, bringing things back into balance, is us having to go and collect crystals of darkness, maybe. Or the crystals of light. Maybe we need the crystals of darkness now to kind of keep things balanced. I don't know.
Okay. Let's see. Sorry, I had another question with that, but I forgot it, so I'm going to move on to this next question. Yeah, actually, this was the exact same question, so I'm going to skip past this one.
Okay.
Let's see. Every expansion has some references to other Final Fantasy games. With what we know so far, which Final Fantasy games do you think that will be the most prevalent in terms of references in Shadowbringers, and why? And this was from Island.
I really don't know, honestly. It looks like we're doing like a reverse Cecil. So I'd be interested to see if there's a lot of like, Final Fantasy IV callbacks. Other than that, I really, really don't know. It's really hard to say. I try not to think too much about how the other Final Fantasy games are going to inspire it. I'm more kind of like work backwards. And when I sort of go through the story, like as like an afterthought, I'm like, oh yeah, and that also, has some similarities to this old Final Fantasy game. And it's kind of a callback or whatever. But I don't sort of, I kind of do that like retroactively. You know what I mean? So it's not something that I'm really thinking that much about. Okay. What about you, Frosty? Are there any like old Final Fantasy aspects?
Chrono Trigger.
You want to see Chrono Trigger?
Yeah. Let's see that.
Well, it's possible that we're doing some time shenanigans. Like it's quite possible. I mean, we've got this line: history must be changed.
Yeah.
Are we going to be going back in time?
I want my Frog Knight, dude. That's all I need, dude.
Oh yeah, just that.
But they already said they're not going to put new races. I might unsubscribe because I'll never be a frog guy. I don't know like how I should interpret my future, but I mean it's very depressing.
Valen makes a good point as well that we could probably expect some more Final Fantasy VIII.
Oh, exactly.
We haven't seen much Final Fantasy VIII so far, so yeah, sure.
Yeah. Okay, I only got time for a handful more questions here, so we're gonna go through these as I can. This is from Rin. And Heaven on High, the Pomanders that we use to summon Ifrit, Titan, Garuda, and Odin are Allegan tech. So
Yes.
do you think that summoners can use them in making new EGs or Eggies by using our memories?
So the Pomanders in Heaven on High are they're basically got a shitload of ether of a particular element in them, and when we release them, we give form to them based on our experiences of creatures with that elemental form, basically. So in essence, they're kind of like any other ethereal battery. They're just something that has a shitload of elementally aspected ether in them. So I guess summoners could use them, but it would be kind of irresponsible just because of the sheer amount of ether that they contain. It's like we, as the Warrior of Light, kind of try to avoid stuff like that just because it's not very good for the environment, basically.
Right. Okay.
It's more of like a Deus Ex Machina. We only use stuff like that when like we absolutely have to. So it'd be kind of hard to imagine that just being part of your rotation, right?
Right.
It would kind of be like using the Tupsamati as part of your rotation.
The what?
So
The
Louis Suarez stuff thing.
Okay. I gotcha. All right. We have a longer question here from Ray. During a PAX 2017 interview with Gamerscape, they had asked Koji why Ramu had a crystal of light. Koji Fox teased the possibility that Ramu could have connections with Hydaelyn. He said there's a reason he's not an enemy of the six races. Within lies the hint. Do you think Ramu is actually Ralgar?
Yeah, Ramu and Ralga have a lot of similarities, and we've all kind of suspected for a long time that they're the same person. I think more importantly, it's like Ramu and Ralga are probably historically the same person, but that person isn't necessarily like a god. You know what I mean? In that all the other primals that we know the origins of, they weren't gods. Like Garuda wasn't a god. Garuda was an Allegan general. I think it's possible that Ramu was an old warrior of light that became sort of revered by people as a sage and eventually as a god for those reasons. That's my sort of current guess about Ramu's origins. And that might be true of many or all of the rest of the 12, honestly.
Okay. This is from Sabilt. What do you think the idea that the desert, seaside, and forest zones previewed are another Shard's reflection of Vilbrand, Thanalan, and the Shroud?
Yeah, I don't think so.
Okay.
Yeah, I really don't think so. Yeah, so the forest, the Great Wood, you look at the concept art for it, and it's got something which is like really obviously a Viera village. We know the Viera are sort of in like Ilzabad and in northwestern Northard. So I think that that's going to be like a transitional zone between the two continents. As for the other one, I don't know. Look, it's possible. I don't think the shards are reflected that closely necessarily. It's definitely possible, but I don't think it's like the most likely thing.
Okay. And then one last question here. Since our jobs are aspects of light crystal jobs, would we need jobs of darkness to combat the flood of light, such as a void mage?
Who asked that? Was that Ramza?
Yeah. Feel pretty upset by that one?
Our job crystals are not light aspected.
Okay.
Our job crystals are neutral. They are not light aspected. We are not getting a void mage. Please. God damn it, Ramza.
You forgot the one bit that went with that question.
Terrible.
Oh gosh. All right. Yeah, that's gonna be it for the questions today, guys. I do have to.
Why'd you have to end on that one?
Sorry. All right. What's the origins of Chocobo racing?
People wanted to. Come on, what's the origins of Chocobo racing? People wanted to race Chocobos.
Okay.
Oh,
They just wanted to race. All right. What's the Why are cactars living plants that run around and shoot spikes out?
I don't know.
You don't know?
No idea. They're seedkin. That's just how they work.
Okay.
It's magic.
At least they're woke, dude. Oh.
They are pretty woke.
All right. Yeah, I gotta get to work here in about like 15 minutes. So I do have. I do this every time. I don't have a fucking watch on my arm, but like I look at the hair on my arm and it tells me what time it is. But yeah, no, I have to get to work, so I can't keep going. And although I want to keep going for more, maybe we'll get at this on a future show here, and he'll answer some lore, but it won't be just about lore. And maybe he'll be on the Chocobo race episode. I don't know.
Let's.
Hey, you want to race, bro?
I've done one Chocobo race.
All right, then maybe you just need to get up to snuff, and we can have a streamer Chocobo race-a-thon.
Yeah, we'll see. I'll get back to you on that.
Okay, fair enough. But Ethys, thank you so much for coming on the show, dude. Is there?
Oh, anytime, dude.
Go ahead and say all your last words, your shout-outs, everything that you want to do.
Well, you can find me on Twitch pretty much every day on twitch.tv/EthysAsher. You can follow me on Twitter, on YouTube, on Instagram, on Facebook, all the same, EthysAsher. Shout out to Frosty for having me on his show again. If any of you guys are dropping in here from my things and you're not following Frosty in all the places, then you really should. You should do it. Ignore the fact that he mostly just talks about PvP and that's a bit resident sleeper. He's really a nice guy. All right, you should give him some love.
Sometimes I can be. It depends. Yeah, I haven't been streaming really at all, but I do MogTalks.
Well, all the more reason to follow you. So you know when he does go live.
Yeah. But go ahead. Any other shout outs? Last ones?
No,
just me?
I'm good.
Just me?
Yeah, just you, buddy.
Oh, man. Sweetheart, dude. Sweetheart. I like the hair. Man, I love the hair, dude. I just want to grab
Thanks,
it.
bruh.
Yeah. Anyways, guys, we're going to wrap up the show now. Thank you all for tuning in. Thank you. Please, if you don't follow Ethys for some crazy reason, please do. If you enjoyed watching the show, catch us next time. We are not doing one next week. We have some holiday things we have to do during that weekend, so I will not be available for it. But the following weekend, we'll see what kind of show we might be having. We do have the live letter coming up on the 21st, so that would be the day after the live letter, so it's highly likely that we will have a MogTalk where we'll bring on people to talk about the live letter. Who knows? Maybe Ethys wants to come on and talk about the lore aspects of the live letter. Who knows? We'll see. But look forward to the 22nd possibly being the next show that we have, but for sure the next week, sorry, not 20 something, but next week we won't be having MogTalk. But yeah, follow the stream if you want more stuff from this channel. We will be back then. Thank you very much, Carrara, for helping out with everything in the chat, collecting questions, making sure things are kept orderly, all the mods that we have out there, everyone who's followed, subscribed, everybody that supported the show in any way. Thank you, Blizana, for the layout that I have manipulated multiple times, and Andre Kane for the intro and outro music that we use for the show. But yeah, until next time, guys, be good, keep cool, stay frosty. Say bye, Ethys.
Bye, everyone. Bye-bye.
Okay, perfect.